Hello everyone, myself Rupali Gupte, Principal of Srimati K.L. Tiwari College of Architecture, an educational institute under Rahul Group of Schools and Colleges. I'm extremely pleased to welcome you all on our third Rubaru session and with a special guest, Architect Shardul Patil. He is one amongst the three dynamic members of his team and firm Design Jatra. Design Jatra is an architecture and research studio, and they practice with the sustainable and environmental sensitive practices. This team of three, that is Shardul Patil, Pratik Dhanmer, and Vinay Chiragia, started with a passion of believing in local architecture. And true to their passion, they have experimented with local techniques and skills by collaborating with local craftsmen and skilled labor. Design Jatra has also been accoladed by National Award for their exceptional work. Dear friends, I'm extremely happy to have this team with us today. We had collaborated with this team in 2019, and our young students from the third year of architecture, have been with them for the entire term, and they have come up and understood, documented their techniques, their construction techniques of vernacular architecture, and they have presented an e-book for you. So today's session is very important and very touching for all of us because it is a combined effort of Design Jatra, who would be expressing their work and their passion in front of all you young students. At the same time, we'll be launching our e-book on vernacular innovations. So let us not hold back and begin this marvelous session, which we are very, very intensely looking forward. We welcome you, Shardul, and we thank you so much for being here today with us. We are all eagerly awaiting your presentation. Thank you so much, audience, again for being here. You are our true support. Thanks a lot.
Hello, my name is Shardul Patil. I am the co-founder of Design Jatra Architects. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to tell how the presentation is structured. Generally, we give a presentation of our projects, which is around 45 to 50 minutes. But this time we decided to do something very different because there's a very interesting Q&A session after the presentation. So we decided to keep the presentation very short, give very specific details of the project that we showed, and keep questions reserved for after the presentation so we can have a larger Q&A session. The presentation is structured in a series of questions that we generally get asked during our presentations that we give in colleges, in architectural firms, etc. etc. So these questions will be answered through our projects. We would really like you to, like the audience, to ask more questions so that we can show you more details of these projects in the Q&A session. So with that, I begin the presentation. So first and foremost, what is Design Jatra? Design Jatra is a collaborative, first of all, of architects with a tribal community of a village in the Dhanu Taluka of Palghar district. We are three of us who are the co-founders of the firm, Vinita, me and Pratik. We are in collaboration with this community since 5 years now. And with the community, we do a lot of things. Apart from that, we are also a huge collaborative of artisans who work with traditional crafts like bamboo making, stone carving, making arches, making mud mortars, making mud plasters, etc. And we are also collaborative of architect students who come to to work with us on our sites, who come on our workshops, who come as interns. So with that type of skill, Design Jatra started with this particular image. It's a product of a long travel that me and my friend Prateek took in our native district of Patna to understand the district, because at that time, this was about 6 years ago, we really wanted to do something with our district. The travel kind of brought us down to this painting, which is a Varli painting, which is made by the Varli tribes, which is famous throughout the country, but this particular tribe is from the part of the country where we are. This painting says home or Mazhar. If you observe the painting, the artist has not just drawn the house like we do in architectural renderings. The artist has drawn the whole context around with the house. There is a mountain, there are trees, there's a river, there's fish, and more importantly, there is the community at the bottom, the sky, the sun. Everything for a tribal person comprises of the idea of a home. Unlike us who buy houses which are 1 BHK, 2 BHK, pre-built, built by somebody else. So when you talk about maintaining your house, you maintain only that property which you bought. But when in the traditional tribal dialogue, when a house or when a village is maintained, the whole forest, the whole settlement, everything is maintained with it. Everything is in a cycle, and everything constitutes the idea of a house, right? The structure itself, the four walls, is just a mere storage and protection. But everything else is responsible for the survival of the family. This central idea is what governs each and every aspect of our practice. So to give a little context, we are just north of Mumbai. It's a district which is now divided into Thane and Palghar. Initially when we started, it was one whole district. You can see that red patch on the India map over there. For almost 6 months, me and Prateek were kind of traveling the whole of the district to understand what the people, what their aspirations were, what the context was like. What we realized was, in this one small district of our country, we have a huge array of construction techniques. The diversity that we observe not only geologically but also through construction techniques, lifestyle, languages is vast. So right from, as you can see, sparsely spaced wattle and dog pyramidal houses to huge timber, heavy timber use in adobe homes in the hills. You have large wattle and dog mansions. You have large brick and mud mortar mansions in the hills, which again use a lot of wood. You have on the coastal side huge Parsi community homes. There were almost 6 distinct typologies of architecture that was seen in the district when we traveled. And that, so there's one more where the roof is almost touching the ground. This is observed in regions where there is high rainfall, especially the ridges of the Sahel. So we were questioning our education at that particular point of time, that we were taught probably 2 or 3 or 4 technologies, but in this one small district we had such an array of techniques. So that got us into a dialogue with the builders of our district. So we sought out masons, we sought out traditional craftsmen, trying to understand what they were doing, trying to document what they were doing in the past, and trying to understand the reasons why they are not doing it anymore. At the same time, we were also documenting communities and understanding their aspirations of what communities the current modern tribal community or the current modern tribal youth wants. This was also the time when I did my thesis, and my thesis was a community-driven design. So the image, actually you can see my thesis model in which Prateek, in the village, that was my site, which is also where our office is right now, the same village, where we are trying to discuss have a dialogue with the community about their problems and how to resolve them through a participatory process. So all of these new ideas, participatory processes, community development, traditional technology, all of these things were new. Of course, we had a lot of guidance in terms of our faculty, Malak sir, who was guiding us throughout the process, Ajit sir was guiding us throughout the process. Also farming, because most of this was agrarian communities, so we were also exploring how they farm, because it was almost intertwined with not only with their lifestyle but also with their agriculture. So, for example, the wattle and dog homes, they became mulch for once the wattle decayed, it became mulch for the farm. The rice hatch, the rice grass after removal of rice became very important roofing material for temporary structures. Their housing compounds, which are made of teak leaves, were used in the farm again as manure. The cows and the cattle would eat from the farm waste but give. So everything was tied together, and we were trying to explore the whole context more and more. That led to a lot of interesting series of discussions with the communities that we were talking with. Till this time, architecture was not in our mind. So what we realized was architecture was probably like eighth or ninth concern of these people. They were concerned more and more about their livelihood, and so the tribal identity is like stuck between capitalism and their ancient tribal rituals and laws. So what would their new identity be? So the young generation is kind of this confused state. So we were talking to a lot of young people and trying to get in touch with what they would want to do. So we ended up doing participatory documentation of villages and trying to have a dialogue about what were the aspirations of the tribal youth, because they were sitting on a huge heritage of very interesting tribal cultures and aspiring to be something that they had no idea about, like a modern civilized life or whatever you call it. So, in the meanwhile, what we realized that yes, we were architects, and the way we could impact this community was first through our architecture and then probably through our livelihood options. So we decided this kind of threefold definition of our firm. So what does Design Jatra do? First and foremost, like I said, since we are architects, we build homes for a wide array of clients, right from the tribals to people who want second homes, to people who want probably eco-tourism resorts, to people, to farmers who really want like first homes. So we primarily build in the rural sector, and we build with local techniques and local materials. Why we decided to go this way? Not because it was sustainable, not because it was cost effective, but because when you use local technology, local material, you give rise to a lot of local economy. So, in our initial discussions, which was approximately 2 years, we were just figuring out what we should as a firm do, because we were looking at a huge tribal ethos and we were wanting to work with that ethos. And how to work with that ethos was through architecture, according to us, one of the ways. So, hence, wherever we go, we try to engage with local masons, local artisans, local community to build structures. And what the local community knows very well is building out of local material and local technologies. Still, in the villages that we work with, technologies like RCC are pretty new, and they end up spoiling the whole thing. But they do local technologies and local materials very well. So a little bit of improvisation in their local techniques leads to phenomenal results. You can see that in the presentation later on. That's our first, that's what we do first and foremost. We also work with a lot of tribal communities for participatory designs. So why participating? Because we believe that when there's a community structure being built, for example, a community temple or a community center or a forest food processing center or whatever, uh, it makes sense to involve the whole community, and only then the community would take care of that structure. For example, if you now correctly, there is this huge movement where the government is building a lot of toilets in the rural areas, but it is not via a dialogue that is established with the community. Once this dialogue is established, the community understands whether it needs the toilet in the first place, whether it has the capability to maintain the toilet, and after all of these discussions, whether the toilet should be built in a place that it is built. So once all this dialogue is done, the community is aware about the structure through and through, and the structure gets maintained, structure gets used, the structure fulfills its purpose much better than what would a top-down approach where a government says, okay, this village needs 35 toilets, build 35 toilets wherever you have land. That doesn't work. So whenever we engage with community buildings, we engage with them in a participating method. The third very important part of the organization is where we are actually dealing with the community in which our office is and trying to figure out livelihood for this particular community, which is a community of tribal Bali and Malay tribes, and trying to figure out how the livelihood for this community would work, right from getting into their farming habits to their forestry habits, and now slowly getting into their handicraft habits. So, having said that, this is what Design Jatra does. We get a lot of FAQs when we tell these themes to people. Right from the tribals who ask us a lot of questions, to students who ask us a lot of questions, to our parents who asked us a lot of questions when we began the whole practice. So let's go to these questions one by one. So the first and foremost and the most funniest question that we ever encountered, and it's a very innocent question, is that people would ask, can you build these structures in heavy rainfall? Won't they melt away? Won't they get eroded when rains, when water is splashed on them? Won't they get washed away? Etc. etc. So we all have to remember that before cement came into picture, before steel came into picture of construction, Indians lived in these technologies. Indians lived in mud, bamboo, wood, lime, cow dung homes for centuries. So it is not that cement has changed those technologies. Those technologies are still there for people who look for them. It's just that yes, people have lost the art of doing these technologies well, maybe in some areas. Fortunately, in the areas that we work in, these technologies are still very active. But yes, and also our lifestyles have changed. These technologies demand a certain kind of lifestyle. So we need to alter these technologies a little bit so that we cater to the changed lifestyle, and also we keep the rural economy working, we keep the rural ecology working. So for example, what do I mean by rural ecology working is, if I don't use bamboo, the bamboo in the forest is not valued by the community anymore. Whenever I use bamboo for structure, the value of the bamboo goes up, and more people start planting bamboo. We have seen this as an example, and I will show it to you later in the presentation. So to answer this question through a project, I will take up this particular project, which is a project in the village that we have our office in. This is Pradeep's house. So the project is like a collaboration between his family and the technology. So a certain amount of sacrifice in terms of lifestyle was made by his family, and certain amount of changes in the technology was made by Pradeep while building this house. So the technology is hybrid between battle and dog. Battle and dog walls end up being not more than 2 inches thick in this particular region. Terracotta floor, and a hybrid mix between exposed brick with mud mortar. The roof is very traditional. Of course, it is very complicated design. The traditional structures would be just pyramidal. But instead of having, say for example, powder floor which you have to do every month, we put up terracotta floors which are more friendly to the feet. They are insulative. They are really good to walk on. Like again, instead of doing a full wattle and off wall, we did walls which had a ledge wall of about 2 feet, and then above that there was wattle and off walling, so that the wattle and off doesn't rot from the bottom. So a little bit of changes here and there, so which make the technology last more, reduce maintenance by almost 50%, and help the family live a better, a healthy life. At the same time, give rural economy a boost, and also the rural economy a boost. So that is the idea. So that's the inside. It's a very rustic house. His family was okay with the rusticness of the structure. You can see the wattle and dog walls in the picture actually, and the terracotta floor. Also, one more complaint that people have with traditional homes is that it doesn't allow a lot of light to enter. Again, it's a problem not of the technology but of the designer. So, if your design sense is a little bit, that's what you as an architect would offer such a technology, where you are taking out all these questions which the context throws at you, that it doesn't look good, it is not climate resistant, it is not light friendly, it is suffocating. Whatever questions are there, we can solve them through design. That's what 5 years of training should ideally do here. The next question that we get asked quite a lot is, you use a lot of wood, you use a lot of mud, you use a lot of stone. Is this really sustainable, and what is your idea of sustainability? I could answer this question again through a project. So if you look at the land that I'm showing on the slide right now, when we visited this site is a very small site. It's about 10,000 square feet. The site had not a single blade of grass growing. The reason being, the slope of the site was altered by the contractor over there in such a way that every rains, kgs and kgs of soil would wash away, and there was no topsoil for growth of any particular plants. So the client came to us saying that I don't want just a house, I want a house which would sustain a habitat. So this is what happened to the site the first year we actually did the project. We built the house very small because already the land was small. The client also was agreeing to a very small house so that more and more land could be given to ecological restoration. And we built the whole house on a retention wall. More and more planting systems were allowed to rescue soil erosion. This is the second year of the house. The house is now getting more and more covered with vegetation. These are some interior photos. I would love to discuss the interiors of the house when we actually have the Q&A session. We have used a lot of waste wood in the process. We've used a lot of local bricks, mud mortar, powder plaster, etc. So what such houses enable us to do is, one, use a lot of recycled material in terms of wood. Second, very interestingly, it allows us to plant trees which we use while construction. You won't be able to do that with cement or steel. You have to have that much capability to know where the cement is coming from. But here, what we are doing is we are trying to plant as many trees as we use for construction, so that whenever new constructions happen, these trees can be reused. Also, we use the native woods and we use a diversity of woods. We use almost every structure, like 5 or 6 types of woods in the structure instead of just using teak, so that more and more diversity gets planted. Another question that gets asked very frequently is, do we get enough work because the rural sector, what kind of architects work in the rural sector? So we started off working on my own house. This photo is of my own house. Once this house was built, we have never had a year where we did not have work. We deal with clients right from the poorest of the poor tribal people to people who, like I said, who want second homes, very lavish. So I've shown both these. So initial picture was about of my house. Now the picture that is shown is a mud house only, but it looks exactly like the city house. So the intention of building this house was the client did not want any rats in the house, no insects in the house. The house should be very well finished because she wanted it that way and very well detailed. So the house looks this way. We also get a lot of NGOs who want to build rural schools, rural toilets, rural temples, etc. So there is a lot of work. We also work with government on doing community projects like the picture that is shown here, which is a community center in traditional technology. Another thing that we get asked a lot is whether these houses are disaster resilient. I would like to answer this question to a project which just put a disaster. So this particular house is a no cement house that we built in the Roha Taluka of Raigad district. It's a wattle and daub structure. Inside there are cob storages, mud plaster with a mangrove tile roof. This is how the house looked. It just got hit by the Nisarga cyclone, this particular place. All the houses around this particular house were severely destroyed. Mangrove tiles flew away, mangrove tiles broke, trees fell down, etc. But this house, apart from its plaster chipping a bit, did not have any severe damage, no leakages. So yes, if you again, this question is not of the technology. Mud per se has survived so many disasters over here. It is the question of how well you detail a particular structure. We've had earthquakes on our structure, we've had cyclones on our structure, and thank God, touch wood, nothing has happened till now. This is the inside of the house. Like I said, it has cob storages inside, cob inbuilt seatings inside, large bay window. It's a very small house again. Are these structures cost effective is again something that we get asked. Cost is a very subjective term. What we tell our clients is that the idea of cost is basically fivefold. It is dependent on how well detailed you want the structure, whether you want the structure to be well finished, whether you want the structure to be insect resilient, whether you want the structure to be rodent resilient, and how fast do you want the structure to finish. So all these five factors contribute to the cost of such structures. We have designed structures for tribals which are extremely cost effective, and we have designed stuff which are way more costlier than normal traditional or whatever the cement homes would cost. So I will show you both these examples. One of this is what we actually won an award for cost effectiveness. Is a structure built for a tribal family in our district. So the design of this structure stemmed out from its costing. So we actually decided the technology first because that's what determined the cost and the maintenance, and then we decided what would be the design. So we kept the design very simple, something that it could be executed in not more than 3 months, and something that local masons could imagine very easily. In such cases, we don't spend a lot on detailing and drawing because the tribal family is quite okay with the rusticness of the house. We just make a e-process model of how the house will be made, and we explain that to the mason, and it's very quick. However, the result is way more upgradation than what the family was living in. Secondly, it is a very stable structure. This structure also is hit by annual high pressure winds in the pre-monsoon and post-monsoon, and doesn't actually, when everywhere else tiles are flying off, there's destruction, doesn't face any destruction per se. Also, earthquake resilience in terms of tie beams and everything is being given in this house, and a much lesser maintenance than what the family would have had to do in their traditional old structure. So it's an upgrade, but it is not an upgrade where the person has to change his or her lifestyle. So while building this house, the family planted the trees again for their children because they use the trees planted by their grandfather. So they have to plant more for their grandchildren to use whenever they do their structure. They made their own bricks. Most of the labor came from the village. The whole community helped to build the structure. As opposed to this, which is a highly finished structure, it's a second room. We take also very, we also are very happy with the finishing of this structure. It's very much detailed, very much finished for the second home lifestyle. And yes, cost is also very high. So, how do people also ask us how do you get paid doing what we are doing because most of our structures are community structures, second homes, etc. So what we realized is in the rural sector we need to actually change the type of payment received by the architect for different projects. We have to reiterate our way of taking payment per project. So we have done, for example, this particular project is a forest food management center. It's for a tribal community who has saved around 75 hectares of forest for themselves, and now they are taking forest food out of it and selling it to the city as a livelihood option. So this project was also done in a very cost-effective manner, and the community might not have enough money to pay us as fees. So, and yes, the whole structure was done in Shramadhan where everyone, even us, used to participate in the construction process. This is a cartoon made by Libaris. You can check it on his Instagram page. Basically, we took fees from the community in terms of various methods. We are still getting some money, some rice, some pulse plates or whatever from the community, and partly they also paid us in money how much they could afford. So we had to change a little bit our mode of taking money. The initial project that I showed you of the tribal person, there we asked that person that he should pay us per day daily wage as much as he would pay a skilled mason. Eventually, it ended up being some 10-12% of the total construction cost, but for him it was very easy to pay us in bits and pieces. So, and yes, obviously, when people come to us to build second homes, it's generally a percentage of the fee. Does government accept these techniques? The government is kind of right now stuck in between the whole logic where it's very difficult for the government to accept this because it's such huge diversity. Mud, when used in one place, after 5 kilometers it changes, so it's very difficult to standardize. But having said that, we have worked in collaboration with government in some projects. This is an Indira Awas Yojana. Back then it was known as Indira Awas Yojana. Now it is known as Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana project, where we actually proposed certain things to the government officials and executed them in the villages that the government was trying to build homes. The result was, if you see this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana house, it crumbles. For example, this is built in Bid, where there is water shortage, and cement is the most blasphemous material over there because there is no water to cure the cement. So why would you build such a house over there? So that's what triggered the dialogue with the government officials. So what we built was with local materials. We had to get structural engineers on board to get it certified, to get it acknowledged that it will last for 5 years. So until the government schemes many times, especially the rural schemes, they don't mention the technique or technology in which a structure should be built. They just say that it should last for a certain amount of years. Once you prove that, it's not so much of an issue. So these are the IMI houses or the PMAY houses built by us in collaboration with the community and the government. They are much more usable. They don't get heated up in the summer. They are much larger than what cement homes offer because they are cheaper. Majority of the material is reused from the old house of the beneficiary, etc. when you say, so why do we call ourselves a social enterprise? Because we work with the community that uh, we are in, the tribal community where our office is. We work with them for farming. We do a lot of work with indigenous seed. If you come to our office, we are in process of making our office. Our office is a part seed bank, part our office, part our community space. It is completely made through hands-on participation of students, and it's an open structure for anyone to come and work on, and that includes the community. We also work with community on handicrafts, so there are a lot of crafts that our community does with bamboo, and we try to work with them to come up to give a new life to their craft so that it is more relevant to the modern context, especially to architects' life. And so you can visit the Toker Instagram page to know more about these products. They are available for sale. And the last question that I would like to handle is when people ask me, are there skilled masons in the community still existing? If you go back to the first slide that I presented, yes, there are skilled masons if you look for them. A lot of them have lost hope in their technology. It is architects like us who, us not Design Jatra, but whoever is listening to the talk, we are the ones who will give them patronage to do what they used to do well. So I would urge everyone to ask more questions so that you guys can probably start practicing the concept.
One, go.
Hello. Hi, Shardul. This was a wonderful
Hi, ma'am.
presentation. Wonderful. I think students must have immense questions in their mind right now. And we can just check these questions with them one by one as they ask us. Yes. Yes, students. Do come up with your questions. Shardul, how long are you here in this?
Uh,
This
Rural sector in practicing. So we started exploring our ideas probably in 2013. But for 2 years, we were just exploring about what to do, how to engage with the community, whether we want to work with tribal communities or no. Exactly when you say tribal community, what does it mean? Almost 2 years, I think, took for that. Then we kind of became Design Jatra as around 14 end November 2014,
right.
and I think yes, 5.5 years since. There are some questions from
Yes,
students.
yes, of course, of course. There are some questions. Let's take those.
So, hello, sir. What is your plant selection criteria for roof and walls? Okay, nice, good question. So, what, like I said in the presentation also, that we generally, first, whenever we get a project, we go to the area around the project. So, for example, if I get a site in XYZ village, I will document the homes that are built in that particular village to understand what wood the people have been using traditionally in that village. Uh, we also meet a lot of timber masons, old timber masons in that particular village to understand what wood they are using and how they are using it. For example, when you go to say a village in Konkan, they will build doors out of fanas. But if you go to a place, fanas is jackfruit wood. If you go to a place in Palghar district, generally the woods used are for door window is Hedu Karam. So we have botanical names for all this. But so we ask these masons to show us the wood. So they use these woods because they are suitable. So why in Konkan fanas is used is because it is very humidity resistant and it doesn't expand contract as much as other wood, and it's not as costly as teak. Similarly, the same properties are shown in this Hedu wood, which is called Haldina cordifolia also in Palghar district. But because furnace is not so much available here, they use this particular kind of wood. So local variations in wood are there everywhere, and people who live in these villages know how to use their wood because they've been using it for centuries. So, like I said, in any project we use for different purposes around minimum 5 woods. Maximum in we've used in my house around 12 kinds of wood. So for these guys have for compression. So for example, posts or columns which are in compression, they have a different kind of wood. For brackets, they have a different kind of wood. For common rafters, they have a different kind of wood. What also happens because of that is in the forest when they are cutting this wood to get to make the home, not one species is not under pressure. It also helps, like for example, when I did my house, I used furnace, I used teak, I used ain, I used babu, I used hedu, I used sisham. It becomes for me very easy to replant all of this because there is so much of biodiversity that I can plant. I also use a lot of jamun wood, so I can get fruits and jamun as fruit. I can get fruits from the jamun and furnace trees. I can get wood again from ain and all these species. So yeah, so how we select wood is generally based on what people are using in the locality. That's step number one. Step number two is the IS code. Thankfully, there's an IS code for wood, Indian standard codes for building structures. And you check all the values that these particular woods have in IS code. Generally, they are good to go, but we still do a cross check, and we have structural engineer who designs with these woods for us, to us Sanjay sir. So I hope I have answered this question. If there is another trailing question to this, you can still ask. Okay, so Khushali Jain is asking, do this tribal community have some conditions or choices for recreating the structures? Okay, an interesting question again. Yes, always. So, whenever we do community structures, the design, as we say, is 50% us and 50% the community. So they will always have conditions. They will always have, like for example, there was this one slide. I'll go to that slide. Uttam, can we have the PPT shown on the this thing? Okay, this one. So when the slide comes up, I'll just forward. But anyway, so when we were designing this particular structure, hopefully the image of the structure will come on the slide. What this community, so you can see there are two models. Yeah, thank God. So there are two models on the table, and so we designed both of these models in the village. We were sitting in their main square and we were designing. So everyone who was coming and going, we were there for 3 days. We were living in one of these person's house. A person in blue, we were living in that person's house, and we were kind of designing it over there. So they were giving us crits and comments as we were designing. Even through that, 2 options got selected, and then there was a huge village meeting where they selected the option that this guy is pointing on to. Even when they selected the option, there were many conditions, that you need to do this, you need. So like, for example, over here they use spot tiles, which are round tiles. So they wanted an upgrade, they wanted to go to Mangalore tiles instead. So there was a huge debate between people who wanted to go to Mangalore tiles and people who didn't want to go to Mangalore tiles. And then we kind of gave them a solution where we would redesign the traditional pot tile. The pot tile is made in the village. by these villagers themselves, so that whatever issues they had with the pot tile slips away, it's too heavy. Whenever a monkey climbs on it, it breaks. All of these issues could be resolved. So yes, the community always has their choices and their conditions. What we have to balance is what we want to achieve through our structure. So what we wanted to achieve through this structure, this is a community center. We wanted it to be built in traditional materials, but initially it took a little bit of convincing to the community, but later on they kind of got on board once these 3 days when we were designing, and we kind of told them what we were up to, so they were on board with us. I hope they are still on board. This is not a built structure. It will start post monsoon, hopefully, if the corona situation is kind of okay. I hope I have answered this question, Kushali. Next is Kunal Darvi. How do you convince the client, and do you spend time with them to convince them? Okay, this is also a good question. No, we don't convince our clients unless it's a community that we are dealing with. Like we said over here, in this particular project, there was a community, and the community, because it's so many people, it's not convincing that is required many times for a community. It's just for them to be aware that the traditional structures can work in this way. Many times, communities are pro traditional structures, but they don't know how to get rid of the shortcomings of traditional technology. When it comes to private clients and people who want to build homes in the context that we build in, we don't convince, because I don't think that ever lead to a good relationship. What we get rather is people who are already convinced. In fact, when we actually get clients, we have this. The first session is when we sit with the clients and grill them with a lot of questions as to why do they want to build in such a way. We tell them, look, you are going to have rats in your house, you are going to have insects in your house, you are going to have to maintain. We tell them all the possible negativities of the structure, and try to understand what they want out of the structure, because mud technology or traditional technology have such varied kind of spectrum of finishes, of lifestyles that it can support, that we need to understand what the client exactly wants and build that exact thing for them. The other part of the question that Kunal has asked is, do you spend time with them? Yes, because these. So, for example, if I were practicing in a traditional, matlab the modern interior design or architecture setup where the materials are pretty standard, cement, steel, say vitrified tiles. I'll give this example to vitrified tiles. So, for example, all of us have been grown up in vitrified tiles, or maximum say Kota stone. That's the most natural that we have been. So, for us to have reference of say I want a terracotta tile or I want a cow dung floor, it is very difficult to know what a cow dung floor feels like, what a cow dung floor does to you, what kind of maintenance does a cow dung floor require. We don't have that reference in our brain. So whenever somebody asks, okay, I want a cow dung floor, we first take that client to a project that has cow dung floor for that person to understand what he's asking, he or she is asking in the first place. Because a lot of times these wishes come through nostalgia, and that's not a good place for a wish to come, because all of these structures cost, low or high, whatever they cost. So we need to be, we have the moral responsibility as architects to tell clients the full story of what we are going to give them. So generally around a month goes for us to even start designing. We spend a lot of time with the clients. We show them projects, show them the finishes, we show them pros and cons of everything. And also we document the village in which we are going to build. So all of this takes 1 month or 1.5 months generally. To understand site, we generally say, so we generally don't build in the rains, because rainy season is you can't build mud structures in rainy season. So we generally design in the rain. So we generally prefer visiting the site in the monsoon, spending some time on site to understand the way water flows, the way wind flows, for us to build structures very well. So yes, almost a month and a half, sometimes even 2 months go before we actually start designing. Okay, so Purvi Patel, sir, you talked about using recycled materials. Can you please elaborate it? Okay, so we use a lot of recycled materials in terms of whenever we are doing a project with the community where there is an old house or an old structure and we are redoing that structure. The idea of building with traditional structure is that we can reuse the same material. It's not recycle, it's reuse. Recycle is we generally wherever we take wood from, which is the sawmills, and we generally take the waste from there also. You will see that in some of our projects. One second, I think I have a slide here. Uttam, if we can go to. Oops. Yeah. So okay, so if you see the image on the right, you will see a wooden post over there. That actually post had some mealybug infestation, and the sawmill was going to throw that away. So we kind of take all of this wood that the sawmill generally wants to throw away to use that in the structure. You will also see these windows. I am not sure if they are visible in that detail. Let me see if I have more images of these. Yeah, so this one is slightly better. So these windows have bamboo slatting on them. The reason for the bamboo slatting is not actually aesthetic. The windows are made out of very thin sections, which is 2 by 1, and in some cases 2 by 1.5. So these windows, these sections in the sawmill are sent out as waste because nobody uses them structurally. So we generally take these sections, and the bamboo is actually that ties all of these sections together to make the window strong. So our attempt is generally to use waste wood as much as possible, and then try and take new wood. So whenever we are documenting the sites that we are building, also there are sometimes that these houses are broken in the villages which are traditional homes. We take wood from there as well. Apart from that, we've per se not done any recycling of garbage or anything like that, though we like to do that. In some cases, we have used waste bottles, but that's very limited, not very substantial that we can call it as recycled material. So that is Purvi's question. If any of these questions is unanswered, you can ask it again. Rohan Prabhu, hello sir. How would you justify Design Jatra's approach as similar or different in comparison to conservation architecture? So we are not a conservation firm. Conservation architects do a lot of work where they are conserving old buildings. However, if you ask us if we are ecologically conserving, then we try to do that. We try whichever site we get, we take up the whole site so that we can generate an ecological balance around the site as the structure is getting built. So for example, again, I would want to go back to the uh, So this particular project from year one, which I showed the image, then this the second year after the structure getting built. All of these plants are native, and then what it has resulted to now, and now this will grow even more. Since the time that the structure came up, there was not even a single bird residing there. Now there are almost 4 pairs of Indian robins who are nesting over there 24/7 all year round. There are around 2 species of snakes. I think there are innumerable butterflies that live there. So our idea is to not just build the structure but to build the habitat. So currently I am doing a project which we have created a whole habitat on around 3 acres. So similarly, the house is just 1,500 square feet, but we are building a full habitat on that whole 3 acre plot. So that is our kind of conservation. If you are asking conservation in terms of heritage conservation, then no, we have not worked in a heritage project till now. We are not fully equipped with doing heritage buildings, especially the ones that are there in the city. But we would like to do that if we get a chance. Anjali Katke, how can we practice sustainable architecture form in a crowded and fast city like Mumbai? Okay, this question actually I was going to add in the PPT because we get asked this question almost in all our presentations. Uh, so when so we don't believe in say a particular material like mud or whatever. So whenever you have things in a city like Mumbai or things in a crowded place or urban center or whatever best we can do, I think we should be doing that. So for example, there are a lot of friends of ours who are working in the urban areas where they do lime plasters instead of cement plaster. So even if you make that one small change of doing lime plaster instead of cement plaster, it is a big impact in a city like Mumbai. So you can definitely do terracotta tiles instead of vitrified tiles. You can definitely do filler slabs instead of standard slabs. You can definitely do exposed brick walls instead of normal walls. You can definitely go for natural paints instead of synthetic paints. You can definitely do uh, load bearing structures up to G+2. You don't need to do an RCC frame structure. You can definitely have sloping Mangalore tile roofs in the city of in such cities instead of patras that they put in the low rise buildings in the city. You can definitely have vaults in the city instead of slabs. There's so many things that you can do. Obviously, you cannot be a purist and you cannot stick to the purist form. Even we in the village are never purists. Like we mold our ideas according to the client's need. Uh, so a small step can also result into a big change. So uh, you can go as much natural as possible in a city like Mumbai. There are many firms who are working, for example, in Bangalore. They are working, even a firm like Put Your Hand Together working in Mumbai. They do some interior projects with, for example, rammed earth as walls. They will do bamboo furniture. That also makes a lot of difference. As much so, you analyze each and every element of your structure and try to get the carbon emission, the carbon footprint as low as possible. That is what your approach would be. You don't have to be a purist every time. Okay, Yadnesh Pitre, in one of your recent projects, you use bamboo as reinforcement in plinth slab. Yes. Isn't affect the adhesion bonding between the cement and reinforcement material? Okay, Yadnesh, I'm glad you asked that question. Yes, we used bamboo as reinforcement for the first time. I was very excited to do it. Amongst the three of us, me, Vinita, and project, Pratik, I was the one who was executing that project. So first of all, we were doing it for the first time, and we were not only playing around with the reinforcement, but we were also playing around with the concrete material. Like the concrete is not cement concrete; it is lime concrete. So hence we did not want to take a chance. It's a DPC band that we are trying out here. With just the only structural element over there is where this DPC band projects out by 4 inches. So it's like a cantilever 4 inches where actually load is coming. Otherwise, it's a fully compression structure. Answering your particular question, where you are asking, doesn't it affect? Yes, that is where bamboo reinforcement actually lacks as compared to steel. Because the bond between steel and cement, the bond between steel and cement concrete is very strong, and that is why steel is used that often. The bond between bamboo and lime concrete is weak because of the expansion contraction of bamboo. So, so what we read and what we were advised a lot, again through various friends here and there, especially Thumb Impressions Collaborative, who have been helping us with a lot of technologies, is that you need to make sure that the frictional bond between the bamboo and the concrete is increased. Though we did that to some extent by chiseling out the surface of the bamboo and making it rough, but there are other ways to do it. So they've also tried putting a gunny sack or a jute rope around the bamboo reinforcement so that the bond is better. But yes, that is one area where structurally bamboo reinforcement lacks as compared to steel. In terms of strength, in terms of tensile strength, I don't think it's a problem. Also in terms of, so Young's modulus is less, so you need to actually analyze the bamboo reinforcement very well and use it with what we've realized. We are going to try out a slab, which is a simply supported slab also. Please stay in tune with Instagram. We will update it over there. Apart from sustainability, what are the other advantages of bamboo as reinforcement compared to steel reinforcement? Okay, it depends on where you are procuring your bamboo from. We chose bamboo reinforcement over here because we had bamboo on site. So bamboo currently has been taken away. So the government has taken away the tree status of bamboo. Initially, it was considered as a forest tree, a forest product. So right now, it's considered as a grass, and you can use it without taking any forest permits. So for us, it was very easy to procure, and we did not really want to invest in steel. It was very cheap, freely available, and there was local skill of splitting it very well. So we thought of, we always go to the skill that is existing in the village instead of the skills that have come from outside. So we hence we decided to use bamboo. Of course, in place where you have to procure bamboo probably from some faraway place, you don't have the skill to split it and tie it, doesn't make sense at all. I don't actually believe in the word sustainability. I just believe in the practicality of a particular material. So when we are working in the rural sector, a lot of these sustainable, the so-called sustainable materials are also very practical. So that is what we go for. Recently, we had a cyclone hitting in Mumbai near Nisarga. As you mentioned that you have worked in Dahanu Taluka and Palghar, did the structure survive the cyclone? Oh, actually, I just showed a project which survived the cyclone. Uttam, can you go back to the slideshow? In fact, Mumbai did not get hit by the cyclone as much as Raigad district did. Dahanu mein there was nothing almost. It was just heavy wind. So if you see this project, I got a message from my client one day before the cyclone hit. The message said, I think we are going to lose quite some Mangalore tiles because of this cyclone. And I think there's going to be a lot of property damage. And after the cyclone, the client message, only one Mangalore tile got destroyed, but 2 of my mango trees fell down. So such a strong cyclone that his trees were fallen, but his mangrove tiles did not fall, or neither the structure suffered any damage at all. I'll just change the slide also. I showed one more under the disaster resilient question only. So at least this project has brick, and we've done some earthquake bands. Uttam, go back to the presentation. Uh, okay, wait a minute. So the project that hopefully will get projected now, this particular project is a zero cement project. This one, we have not used cement anywhere apart from the dam proof course, the DPC course. Otherwise, there is no use of cement in this particular project. Uh, Even this one did not have any leakage, any damage, whatever. Yes, it's plaster chipped off a little bit on the north side, which we have to redo. But apart from that, no structural damages. So yeah, this area was hit by the Nisarga cyclone, and this is the result. Can we substitute wood with any other material? Yes, Siddhi Thakkar, that's a good question. We are actually trying to substitute wood with bamboo since the longest period of time, but we are still in the research mode with bamboo, and we really want to do that. You can also substitute wood with steel, though I would not recommend it because what happens is steel rusts very fast in high rainfall regions because the Mangalore tile, which rests on steel, is always wet in the monsoons. Steel requires some maintenance. Of course, the wood also requires some maintenance, but the wood is easy to maintain because the maintenance is about you just cleaning the wood from below with a jhadu, but steel will require anti-rust coat every time you need maintenance. I think after every 3 or 4 years, you will require to recoat it. But yes, steel is a lot sleek looking because the center to center distances are large when you use steel. But you can also have it very neat. The roof comes out very neat because wood generally has some defaults. It bends. There is shear in the wood sometimes. There are knots in the wood. Steel will not have that. So look wise, steel looks much better. Though wood gives a certain amount of warmth to the space. So you have to select pros and cons. So anything that works under tension, so you need to, before replacing anything, check the Young's modulus and the tensile strength of that material for you to be effectively able to replace that material with wood. Uh, so for us, I think bamboo works completely well. Though we have done bamboo in one of the structures. I don't have that structures in the PPT, but we have not intensively done bamboo apart from that structure. Purvi Patel, can we go above 3 or 4 story with this method? So yes, you can definitely go 3 or 4 stories, depending on the technology that you're using. Uh, you need to actually again calculate load, compressive loads. You need to calculate the thicknesses of walls according to what kind of moment they can take, what kind of shear they can take. You need a little bit of calculations here and there, but it's possible. There is a city in Yemen, I keep forgetting the name of that city. There are G+7 structures built in mud in that city. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so you can definitely do buildings which are G+7 in this material. Aishwarya Philip, sir, do you feel sustainable / vernacular architecture is not been given importance in the present curriculum? Uh, Present curriculum is much better than the curriculum of our times, and our curriculum was much better than the curriculum before that, actually. So we do get called for workshops a lot. We do have the talks like we are doing right now, which means that the idea of the curriculum makers is changing quite a bit. When we were in college, we just had one elective which we took for this kind of a project, and that didn't existed before our batch. So currently, yes, it's improving. I wouldn't say it's improving, but whatever. There are technologies like this which have found their place in the curriculum. Though I think I'm not sure. I'm not well versed with the curriculum. They have minimized the presence of load-bearing structure, which is, I think, shameful. Uh, but colleges are being proactive and engaging with more and more technologies, I would say.
Yeah, Shardul, I would just like to mention here that there are many choices that the college that is left with the college actually, so what type of curriculum touch they would like to give. So I think the difference between your batch when the curriculum that went through and right now which the students are going, one silver lining that I see is about the choice with the college as to which different types of electives and how they can parallelly work their philosophy of teaching the students. So along with the curriculum, they can do many other activities, which is a plus point, I suppose.
Correct. Okay, one more question from Roselle. Hello, sir. If a client wants to renovate his or her house, then does it need to renovate from scratch? And if vernacular structure needs renovation, then how many years later it should be done? Good question. So, we did have a client who wanted to do his city home with these technologies, like an interior project. Sadly, the client had budget constraints and he couldn't go ahead with it. Uh, so he wants to, maybe whenever he has the budget, he will do it. Uh, Whenever you have a city house and you want to do such technologies, it depends on till what stage you would want to go with these technologies. Like these technologies are very flexible that way. You can just start by replacing all your plywood furniture with bamboo furniture. You can go ahead one step and replace all your wall plaster and wall paints. First, wall paint with natural paint. Natural paints will go over cement plasters for sure. Then you can go ahead and chip off plaster wall by wall and replace them with lime plaster. The lime plasters need brick surface for adhering. They do adhere to a base coat of cement, but the life of such a plaster, I have never done before. Then you might want to change the flooring from vitrified to terracotta. So step by step, you can go ahead and do small changes in your homes. Uh, Again, one more friend of ours has started this firm called 30 Hands, where she does powder and lime plaster in city houses. So there are many such small changes that you can do. And even if you can't actually change anything, like you don't want to change just for the sake of changing, if you change, then I would say that also leads to a lot of wastage. Um, uh, if you can't change anything, I would suggest start by segregating waste, for example. Start by, uh, if you have balconies, then planting as much food as possible in the balconies. If you so sustainability or sustainable livelihood or lifestyle is a cycle. It is not just architecture. So we believe in all of that. So when I live in the city right now, I try to compost as much as possible, segregate as much as possible. So we have in Borivali, thankfully, we have a recycling shop where I go and deposit all our plastic, our e-waste, and our organic waste so that they do whatever plastic is sent for recycling, e-waste is sent for recycling, and compost is made out of the wet waste. So that, and also slowly, doing things like balcony gardening also helps quite a lot in urban environment. But if you are renovating your house and you decided to renovate your house, I would suggest to strike a conversation with your parents, treat them like clients, and see till what extent are they okay with natural materials and natural finishes. So For example, are they okay with bamboo furniture? Are they okay with terracotta tiles? Whatever they're doing, there are always natural alternatives to that. And little bit of research online will give you a lot of such alternatives. The second part to that question is, vernacular structure needs renovation and how many years later should it be done? It depends on the structure. We have seen structures which are almost 200, 300 years old and they are as good as new. My ancestral house, my mother's side ancestral house in Dadar is still very much perfect. I would say it is an old house in Cadalpur. So it's lime plaster and terrazzo tiles and beautiful house. So renovation, yes, such structures, however, they have some or the other bit that you have to touch up every year. Maybe some mango tiles get broken because there is a monkey jumping on, so you'll have to replace that. Maybe some cob has been eaten away by rats, you have to replace that. However, we can design structures for all of this to not happen in mud and in traditional technologies. I'll just go to one slide. Yeah. Can we have the presentation? So this particular house, not the one that you're seeing on the screen, but the one that will come. That is basically where this particular client said exactly that we don't want any sort of rats coming in the house. We do not want reptiles coming in the house. We don't want any kind of maintenance that traditional mud homes require. But still, we want to build in a mud house. So the only trade-off is cost. Such homes cost much more than a traditional cement house would cost, but it's possible to do a maintenance-free structure in one or Siddhi Thakur. Do you face Tejas Ilan? Thank you, sir. Do you face any difficulties while passing services in these structures? Very good question. Uh, yes. So the thing is, there is this conflict as to the services are very modern, right? Like they are a modern entity, and the structures we are using, the technologies are old. So we have to break our heads with every structure to detail out services. It's not impossible again, but it takes an extra effort from the architect's end to pre-plan services right at the designing stage. Like at the concept stage onwards, we have to start thinking about services. We have to start thinking about each and every pipe because after the structure is built, it becomes very difficult to do jugaad. However, it also depends on the client. Like for example, whenever we have tribal clients, they don't really expect services. So they are okay with filling buckets of water outside their home from well and getting in the bathroom and using it. They don't need piped water inside the house. So it all depends on the client. Whenever there are Mumbai clients who go and build such homes because they are used to a certain kind of a toilet, they expect that when they are building their new homes. So that is when services become very tricky. It also becomes very tricky to make client understand that services are a big issue because everywhere else for architect services are especially for small homes like this, services are sort of an easy matter. So it becomes a challenge because we have to work very intensively on services and we have to know each and every joint of services where we are dealing with clients who expect good services. There are many a times clients, so the structure that I showed with Survive Nisarga, the zero cement structure, the client himself told that I don't want any services in the house. The house is without any plumbing, basically. There are electrical lines, but all of them are exposed. So we do also get such clients who know the technology very well and expect only that much from the tech. Good question. Niharika Desai, can vernacular architecture redefine globalization and evolving contemporary architecture? I don't know. So, it, so it's a huge question to ask. Um, Maybe so. What we would, I will answer this in a way. What we would prefer this to do. So we would prefer more and more architects use local skills to build their structure. Uh, with local skills come local materials, and with local materials comes local economy, and with local economy, according to us, comes local sustainability. Where globalization plays a role is, like I said, whenever we get communities, we need to show them what's happening in the globe around in vernacular or traditional structure for them to feel pride in their own structure. So, for example, when we began practicing or when we began discussing things with community in our village where our office is, they were like, why are they going gagas about wattle and dog technology? Because it's poor man technology. Then for us to show them some references of our own projects and projects that have been happening all around the world with this technology, uh, that's possible only because of globalization. And then people actually know what their technology can do. Whether architecture has the power to redefine a world trend, world economic trend like globalization, I don't know. I don't think so. Um, we as architects, there's a book called Silent Spaces by Gautam Bhatia. I am very inspired by that book. Uh, I think people should read that book before going out into practice in the Indian context. In that book, he says that architecture is, if the world is a stage, then architecture is the background, and the main uh, social policies, economics, all the social sciences are the actors. When somebody goes to see the play, they see actors and not the backdrop. The backdrop, however, if the backdrop is not there, the actors won't be able to do what they're doing. So the backdrop is an integral part of the actor for sure, but um, it is, the play is played by the actor and not the background itself. So architecture is like something that supports world trends according to me, and not the other way around. Sir, is there any height restriction on natural techniques like wetland dog, or any hello? Okay, or any restriction on the height restriction on natural technique like wetland dog, or any special consideration for achieving height? So yes, there are always height restrictions, and all of these are complex structural calculations that sometimes we do. Sometimes we give them to our civil engineers, structural engineers to do. Uh, Generally, but the height restrictions are decided mostly in our cases by the rains, because we have to protect walls from rains all the time. So we have to build walls so that they get protected by enough overhang. If we build a 6 feet structure, then it becomes easy for us to protect. If we build a 16 feet structure, it becomes more difficult for us to protect. So we ourselves define our height restrictions. But there are structural ways to define height restrictions. Vilay Bhavasar, how do you understand dash percentage of vernacular and dash percentage of modern design they need or want? I think by this you are meaning they as in the client. Like I said, we spend almost a month and a half with the client before we start designing, and that is when we understand what they are liking is, what they are actually hinting towards, and then we decide this percentage. It's a good question, by the way. Kapil Singh, do you think about starting a non-profit rather than for-profit firm? Wow, that's a nice question. Uh, the first thing that we as a group decided before even we began practicing architecture is to be a for-profit organization. The reason for that is we wanted to prove to ourselves more than the world, prove to ourselves that such technologies will create profit. When you get tagged as a non-profit, it means, according to us, this is obviously an opinion, it means that your technology will not generate profit and you will have to seek some other source of profit all the time, which we kind of did not like. We wanted to tell ourselves that, this, and check whether this technology can make profit, and it does. And it's not only about technology, even the rural work, the community work, though we are struggling right now because we are doing too many things and we need a lot of people to do that. But on paper, I think even the community work will hopefully after 2 years or 3 years start generating profit from it. And not only profit for us, but also profit for the community that we work with. So no, we've never thought of going the non-profit direction, and we would not want to do that. Tejaswini, hi sir, is there any special maintenance needed for the structure from insects? So that's the key thing that we tell our clients. The first thing, one of the first things that we ask clients is whether you want the home insect proof or whether you want, or whether you are open to insects coming in a structure. Also, what kind of insect, what is the size of the insect that is okay, blah blah. So you once made the structure, it's very difficult to make have anything done over it for insect resistance. You need to design the structure from ground on to resist insects if insects are to be resisted. Things like termites, obviously they need to be resisted. So right from the excavation stage, we start taking steps towards termite resistance. And even after building the house, there are some things that we give the clients to do to keep the house away from termites. There are other insects, obviously, mosquitoes, flies, moths, people have issues with lizards. All of these things, they have different measures. So that's a long question if I have to answer that. Sagar Ketwa, how Design Jatra as a team handle post-construction maintenance? If by any chance any of the structure fails during monsoon season, how it's worked on? As monsoon season have harsh winds plus rain, water percolation. So, okay, Sagar, that's a good question as well. We as a team give the clients a maintenance contract for about 3 years. Though we have never really had any serious damages that have happened to our structure, but whatever damages happen, we kind of do them not with our money. We just supervise the damage repair, but we kind of get them done under our supervision. And yes, there are damages, though there has not been like a major damage that has happened to them. Okay, Vitali says thank you. Simran Almeida, sir, are natural materials better, strong, or recycled materials which should be preferred? Simran, so I think you should prefer whatever is locally available. If it is natural, recycled, whatever it is, I think whatever is locally available, I would go for that. Siddhi Thakur, have you built any vernacular structure in any other state which have different climatic conditions like snow area? No, we have not built in any different state than Maharashtra, but we are building in a different climatic zone. Right now, I'm building one in Nashik, and I'm also building one in Gadchiroli district. So where the climatic zone, so we've been till now working with hot and humid or warm and humid climate. Nasik one is hot and dry, and it's more towards composite, and Gadchiroli is also composite climate. So it's kind of different climate. And yes, we will soon put up posts about these structures. No, we've never worked with an area which has no. Chintan Nirmal, you had done wide range of structures. Can you see the lowest and the high? Okay. So the lowest cost that we have built a structure in is the Forest Food Processing Center. It's around 280 rupees per square feet. And the highest one that we built, I've shown that in the presentation, it's around 3,200 rupees per square feet. That's the range that we have done. Siona, uh, that's just amazing, sir. Thank you, Siona. Shivani, Dan, sir, what are the different ways to get inputs on traditional techniques of building? Uh, I did not understand this question. Different ways, if you mean information, then one is books. Second is documentation, your own documentation. I think 80% of your information will come from documentation and looking at other people's work. We are inspired by a lot of mud practice in Lunachala, collaborative, put your hands together. Thanal, recently we came across Studio Taito in Chennai. There is Chitra Vishwanath. I have so many that we learn from. Uh, how and what made you think to start Design Jatra? So the personally, so if you ask this question to three of us, each one of us will give different answers. Personally, I like to experiment, and I really wanted to work with the district that I belong to. And I really love not experiment in terms of technology, not only technology, but also social experiments, which is why we are working with the tribe community. So that's why my incentive to start Design Jatra was that. Gaurav Mishra, sir, would timber replace concrete in the coming future? I think it. Uh, I don't know because concrete is as a material has revolutionized construction. Uh, it depends on what context. I would love for it to also, if the population of a country start building timber, and if it is only one timber like teak or whichever species, it would lead to another ecological disaster. So there needs to be a balance. I think the building, it's not about material when it comes to sustainability. It's about building small or building only what you require. That is what is required. We are building structures for real estate now, which is what is the problem, not cement or timber. Shivani Desai, sir, what does vernacular architecture mean to you? Uh, So I don't like first particularly the word vernacular because it whenever somebody says vernacular, it gives a picture of a hut and traditional old homes. I do not like that image. I do not like any kind of architecture to be called anything. For me, there are a lot of structures in Dharavi which I can call vernacular. I can call South Korea's buildings also vernacular, Cartons and the vernacular for that matter. So, for me, if you say vernacular architecture, it doesn't exist. I think vernacular or only architecture should exist, and that should be relevant architecture. For me, a lot of buildings that are built in the city are not relevant. Uh, Even in the village, like a lot of materials that I use, lot of techniques that I use, lot of designs that I used are not relevant. For me, what is important is that we build relevant buildings, and I think that will help our fraternity. What, Neha Tony, what were your thoughts when you started working with Burma? I think I answered this question. Purva Parmar, how do you manage the budget of a project along with design? Uh, Sorry, it depends on clients. So if our clients are tribal who have a very strict budget constraint, then we have to first decide okay, this is our capping limit and see what all we can provide in that particular capping limit. Otherwise, if our client wants a certain kind of finish, certain kind of space, certain kind of uh, look to the structure, then cost sometimes take the back and there are people who are in between. So we have to sometimes balance cost, sometimes negate certain ideas according to cost. Sometimes, like for example, the structure that I am doing now with Trambakeshwar, which is on a highly sloping land. So over there, we wanted to build it in a high sloping land is because that particular slope was in the rain shadow area, in an area which rains a lot, if you build on that slope, later on the structure will not get disrupted by heavy rain because it was in the rain pattern, as opposed to the flat land which was in the open, and it would have had a lot of disaster later on. So a cost spent right now on sloping foundation would result in a lot of cost saving later on from repairs. So such kind of balancing you have to always do. And yes, so costing is also in a part of design, I would say, because a lot of decisions are dependent on cost many times. There are very few clients who would come to you and say that, budget is unlimited, build what you want to build. We've had none of such clients. Uh, we need to understand the costing impact of each decision that we take and accordingly take decisions. This comes through experience also. We are not fully experienced with that. Maybe we will get better in something. Neha Soni, sir, for temporary structure used in the film world, would you prefer to? I would love to do such a project. We've done something similar in an exhibition where we had to recreate a rural scene, and we did that out of vernacular material, which could be completely composted. That was the idea. I just got married, and the decorations in my wedding were also completely compostable. And we would love if we get a set to do in such materials. We would love to do that. Akash Singh, I think that's the last question. Sir, how does the foundation of a structure differ in hot and dry versus wet and dry? The structure and the nature of soil changes. Can you distinguish them in layers? Okay, so it is very difficult to answer this question. I'll tell you why. Only in I'm assuming by wet and dry you mean hot and humid climates, which is like Konkan. You will see such a vast diversity of soils. Uh, so if you see our district only towards the coast, you get deep black cotton. As you come to the river bank, you get silty, loamy soil, sandy soil most of the time. As you go towards the hill, on the foothills, you will have good red soil, and on the top of the hill, you will have rock. Uh, so you have in one climate zone only you have so much of variation in the type of soil. I'm sure hot and dry also has these many types of distinguishes in the type of soils that are there. What is important in designing a foundation is that your foundation sits on good soil. And if it doesn't sit on good soil, then you need to design it so that the soil, whatever soil it sits on, maybe 10,000 kgs per centimeter square, which is the black cotton soil bearing capacity, from 45,000 kgs per centimeter square, which is of compact soil. You have wide range of soil bearing capacities, and each of them will give you different kind of design. You need to know these figures. I know as in college I never paid attention to DOS, but right now the person who designs our structures is Suhas Sande, who also used to teach the structure in college, and he keeps reminding us the importance of knowing certain basic things like soil bearing capacity, nature of soil, what is compressive strength, idea of young, like basic structural elements. Every architect should know before they start practicing, according to me. And only when you know these things, you can play with these things, and that's when you design efficiently. So for both these cases, first, like I said, you need to have strong soil to sit on. Second, you need to make sure that the water will not seep into capillary action. And third, you need to obviously make sure that the foundation takes the load of the structure. So all of these together will give you different kinds of foundation. In hot and dry, in hot and humid climate, we must have done around 12 projects. I think all 12 projects have different kind of foundations because all 12 have different kinds of support. I think I've answered all the questions. They were great.
Yes, and absolutely, absolutely. And you answered so well, Shardul. I'm sure the students must have many more which they would come to you later on, with more and more questions and the inquisitiveness. And this was a wonderful session. I was totally enthralled by the question and answers that were going on. I think we have our book launch now, and you are all set with that also. So I would just log out, and the screen is yours now for the launching of our ebook. Yeah. Thank you, Shalini.
College fourth year architecture students has done with us. So the idea was to make them. I'll just go to the PPT. So the idea was to make them well versed with basics of technologies, the so-called vernacular technologies or technologies in local materials that were there, and to make sure that this whatever they've learned is available for students to do later on. So initiative was taken by Rupali ma'am, the college, and us to document some key things in each structure that we have tried. These are not basics. These are experiments that we've done in each of these structures that these students visited, and then they prepared these reports. These reports have everything from do's and don'ts. They are very small reports, very diagrammatic. So you guys can understand these easily. I hope they will be available soon for you to download in PDF format. I think the college is working on that. So I'll just go ahead. So students visited 6 projects, and some projects were visited multiple times. And each of these projects, they documented one particular element. So, for example, the project in Vajreshwari, they documented the cantilever staircases that we've built. It was an experiment done by us while building this structure to save cost that generally goes in making a staircase. Staircases are one of the most costliest elements of the structure, and this was one of our attempt to save that cost. Again, this staircase was made out of completely waste wood, and it's inspired by one of our faculty staircases. He also has done it for similar reasons, Malak sir. So the book has everything from do's and don'ts of building these staircases to structural calculations that you need to do. Also, the students made a model which kind of I don't know, I think it's still there in the college, of these elements. Uttam, the slides are not visible on the screen. Oh, now they came. Anyway, so this structure was the second structure that they visited for a dormer window. So again, a model was made. This structure was visited for wooden flooring and also the lime plaster. This structure was visited for the rainwater harvesting attempt that we have done over there. Yeah, students should read this report of rainwater harvesting. It's pretty much Also in the same structure, we documented inbuilt furniture. And bay windows. We also saw various ways in which we could build sloping roofs. The basic calculations that go in deciding how to build sloping roof, what material to take, what slopes to take, etc., etc., what woods to take, what joineries to use. And also we saw how to do wattle and daub walls, different ways of doing wattle and daub walls. Made a model of that. And the final structure was visited to study how a cost-effective structure could be built. So the book of all of these together is being made, but we would love to, whoever wants to take the initiative amongst the students, to come ahead and continue this documentation, because there are a lot of things that are still need to be documented. This is, I think we documented 9 elements, and there are many more that could be done. So this is hopefully the part 1 of the documentation. There will be many more such parts. Thank you. I think I'm done.
That was such an inspiring and motivating session, Shardul. Thank you so very much. I'm sure you must have ignited many young minds today. We were already overwhelmed by the work that you were doing, and I'm extremely pleased that you could share it on this platform for all others. We look forward to be a part of your environmental initiatives henceforth, and I'm sure there will be many more who would be wanting and eager to be a part. We wish you all the best in this exceptional work. On this concluding note, I would also like to thank our management, Secretary Sir of Rahul Education, Shri Rahul Tiwari ji, and Joint Secretary Madam of Rahul Education, respected Krishna Tiwari ma'am, for giving our students this exceptional platform to explore and experiment and understand sustainable architecture. We thank all of you who are here today and witnessed this wonderful session. From the entire team of SKLTCOA, we assure you that we will be coming and sharing many more such educational experiences with you. So stay tuned, take care, and be safe. Thank you so much.